And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bashing us, him.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. New York's finest retired and unfiltered podcast. We have, in my opinion, the most misunderstood cop in NYPD in recent history, Edwin Raymond, joining us. I myself have been very critical of Edwin Raymond prior to getting to know him. We've spoken offline several times after we interacted on social media. He was the main star in the video documentary Crime and Punishment, where they spoke out on broken windows policing, quotas, targeting of Black and brown people in policing, particularly in New York City and the NYPD. He recently wrote a book that's out. It's due to be released. I've already pre-ordered it. I recommend everybody pre-orders. It's called Inconvenient Cop. In promotion of that book, he is also hosting an event, Inconvenient Conversations. That's happening October 14th. I'm going to have all the information you need to buy tickets to go to that event, where it is, dates, times, and all that. That'll be in the links below. And he's been walking around on the streets actually throughout the whole summer, having inconvenient conversations, speaking to people. Basically the same thing that me and Eric have been trying to do on this podcast is we always say uncomfortable conversations. But Edwin is saying inconvenient. It's true. It is inconvenient. But I think this is a pivotal moment. I have nothing but the utmost respect for Edwin Raymond after speaking to him several times. And, I always looked at him as a polar opposite to my ideology on policing until I spoke with him. And I said, you know what? It's really not. We're kind of the same about everything. We're here. We're speaking our truth. Yeah, people disagree on certain issues. But I think all in all, when we get to know each other and we actually sit down, we're all human. We all have our own views, our own heart. And it's very important we speak our own truths, because somewhere in the middle is actually the truth, right? It's not my truth. It's not Edwin's truth. It's not Eric's truth. There's the truth, and we have all our views around it. As always, I'm joined by the most complained cop in NYPD history, known as the boogeyman on the streets of the Bronx, Eric Gestam. Eric, how you doing, my brother?
Outstanding. I'm super excited about this show, Edwin Raymond. Obviously, I've heard the scuttlebutt about you within the department while I was on the job. Of course, I saw the documentary Crime and Punishment. And so for what I've heard, for some people, you appear to be a polarizing figure. And for some, you're a support system to them. And I always coin this, and I say this all the time, we spoke offline, that opposition meets opportunity. And that's basically what you're saying by inconvenient conversations or uncomfortable conversations. And I think communication breaks barriers. It unarms everyone, and it really gets down to the root of things. And I was talking with John the other day, and I said, I love to talk to people to find out where their perception came from, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. But just basics. If we watch the movie Batman and we see, how does Jack Nicholson become the Joker? He falls into a vat of chemicals. So it's the same thing. How did I become the person that I am in my perception of policing as the most complained cop? Or how did John get in this position, his perception of vaccine mandates? And Edwin, yourself in your position of your view on policing. So I think that it shows extreme courage for you to come on the show. I think most people expect this to be complete opposition, but I think we have a lot more commonalities than we all are going to be surprised by. So first, let's just start out. I'd love to have you introduce yourself and tell us where you grew up and why and how you became a cop.
All right, guys. So first, thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to be on the show. I've been watching John first on Twitter, and then as you started growing your Instagram page and now the YouTube channel, it's been remarkable to see the transition and the growth. And honestly, you're just getting started. This thing, because of this subject matter, it's really just going to keep growing, because this is something that we cannot ignore as a nation, despite where our views are. And conversations like this is what drives the needle in the right direction. So, Eric, to start, I was born and raised in East Flatbush, Brooklyn. That's where I still live. My parents migrated from the Caribbean, from Haiti. And unfortunately, I lost my mom at a very young age. I was only 3 years old when she passed away. My dad didn't speak English, very poor, grew up very, very poor, like struggling poor. And during the crack epidemic, You know, you can imagine. I mean, you know, we were all here. We know what the nation was like in the 80s and 90s, early 2000s. But for some reason, despite that surrounding, I was always able to walk a pretty straight line. You know, granted, I'm a teenager. I'm going to make mistakes. It's part of life. But for the most part, as friends started getting into certain things, certain activities, certain habits, it thankfully, thank God, it didn't happen to me. It's something I'm still trying to figure out so I can try to pass it on to others. Why was I able to keep my mind and keep my head straight despite everything that I was surrounded with? I started getting stop and frisked around 15, 16 years old, and I get it. The block is hot, right? I get it. I've seen it. I know what goes on, but I wasn't involved. So it would confuse me. And it would always be a white cop. So it was at 15, 16, it was so easy to just oversimplify it as he's racist. You know, he's white, I'm black, he's fucking racist, right? And then at 18, it was like a pivotal moment that was really life-changing. The cop was black, right? I grew up in the 6-7 precinct. It was, now knowing the department, it could have been borough crime, it could have been 6-7 crime. It was a Dominican guy, right? He stopped me on the corner, threw me on the fence. I was walking with my girlfriend at the time. I was only 18 years old. Completely embarrassed me. Emptied the contents of my pockets, put it on the, just threw it on the ground. And then they just jumped in the unmarked vehicle and drove off. And that just, I couldn't shake that experience. Like a week later, it was the only thing on my mind. And I made the decision, I'm going to join the police department because I need to understand why that black man also treats me that way. You know, if it's a white guy, it's easy to say, oh, typical racism. And then I joined the police department. And I just, I went through the academy. I was very shocked that within the academy, I wasn't able to identify what about the training leads to the way that I was being treated. And it wasn't just me, it was my peers. I went to high school in Manhattan, and most schools in Manhattan, the students are from all 5 boroughs. So as I speak to my peers in school and we start trading stories at the lunch table about cops violating us, I'm like, wait, it's happening to you in Stapleton, it's you in Mott Haven, you in East Harlem, you in Jamaica, you in Bed-Stuy too. So I'm saying, this is just how cops treat black folks. But again, when it was another black person, Dominican man, I said, no, I gotta get in there and see what's going on. And yeah, I'll wait for more questions, but that's basically the intro and a little bit about me and why I got on the job.
No, I appreciate that. Eric, I muted you. Just mute yourself on and off between because you got wind in the background. But Edwin, like you, I was stopped a lot as a youth. I was arrested twice. I mean, I won't get into it, but basically I was flaked twice. I've been stopped a million times, tons of summonses. I always had a chip on my shoulder, and they said, oh, it's because we're Italian, right? And I went in with that viewpoint. I did have a disdain with the police. But I started working at a very young age. I became a recruiter, and I was working in Midtown while I put myself through college. And I noticed that as I started working and I stopped hanging out in the park and I stopped hanging out with the people that were bringing heat on me, I wasn't bad. I wasn't doing anything. And I always had I'm not, it's not me. These guys are just stopping me everywhere I go, everything I do. What is it? What is it? What is it? And I kind of evolved early out of, wow, it's me putting myself in that situation. But, and then you join the police department, right? And it's a whole new world. Could you walk us through you stepping in the police department as a black man, as a youth who had a similar disdain that I did and a similar questioning of the police? What your perception of that was? Was it scary? Did you feel outcasted? Anything that you could provide, any details?
Yeah. So, I'll start by saying, I remember hearing you share that story about you having issues with cops as a teen. And I'll be honest, it shocked me. I wouldn't have expected that, right? Because you being a white guy, Italian guy. And I think it's part of the reason for that is we don't speak enough about race because it's become taboo since, let's be honest, since the civil rights movement, 60s, 70s, it's probably the most impolite conversation you can have in public. I also started working very young. I started working at 12, which isn't even legal, but that probably helped save my life because I would literally come home from work and my friends would be involved in certain things. I'm like, when do we start doing this? We're still trying to beat Street Fighter. Like, You know, like when did we start doing all these things? And when I was 15, I started working in Jersey City. And I'll be honest with you, it's the first time I ever saw a white person that was poor, homeless white person. That was an oxymoron to me before 15. My only reference to poverty and whiteness was the movie Home Alone, where the homeless woman comes and saves Kevin. And I thought it might as well be an episode of Star Trek, because I didn't think white and poor could even exist in the same sentence. And that goes with not speaking about race, not discussing race, and not understanding race. But I entered the police department 2008, 22 years old. And from day one in the police, on the line in front of Queens College, that boot camp mentality where the instructors start messing with us. And with me, they kept staring. And I knew what it was. It was this hair. They were looking at me like, how did this guy make it this far with that hair? And in the academy, that was probably one of the main issues I had. I got 4 CDs in the academy because of my hair. That was like my first fight. I had to go to EEO. That's when I learned how EEO was kind of frowned upon. It was like you go to EEO, it's like you're part of the problem. But again, as I said before, in the police academy, I still couldn't pinpoint what it was that was leading to the ways that I was being treated. So we graduate. So I get a collar in the academy. I'm one of the award recipients that walks on the stage. My friends and family are proud. I choose transit. As an award recipient, you get to choose where you want to go. I chose transit. Day one, impact, transit. It was in Transit District 30 in Brooklyn. I will never forget when the lieutenant said, 410 and 10. I'm like, 410 and 10? Is that an address? What is 410 and 10? And that's when, we learned that we had to get 4 arrests, 10 summonses, and 10 stop and frisk. And I was thinking, okay, maybe this is a rookie thing so that you can, get your feet wet so that when things happen organically, the paperwork, the process, etc. And then they paired us up with veteran officers who just had 6 months more prior experience, 6 months more experience prior. And it was all about those numbers, John and Eric. Like, it was all about those numbers. Like, I watched people I knew in the police academy were great people. And I watched them, I'd back them up when they're running a name, or I'd be working with them for the day, and they would turn into people I didn't even recognize. And then I started seeing what the so-called veterans would do. And, we learned from them. Quickly get it out the way because you got vacation coming. Because what people don't know is if you work 20 days out of the month and your quota is 410 and 10, you should adjust the quota. I mean, the quota shouldn't exist, but for hypothetically, if you work only 10 days, shouldn't the quota be 2, 5, and 5? NYPD doesn't accept 2, 5, and 5. They don't care if you work one day. It's 410 and 10 every month. So I watch as my colleagues would ice pick, which for those who don't know, that just means you don't care what it is. If it's in the law book, you're running the name, you're hoping that there's a warrant, you're getting the collar, you're writing the summons. And so I start watching this and I'm questioning it, right? And I'll be honest, if it was a white colleague, I didn't feel comfortable having the conversation about, yo, what the fuck is this? What is this? But if it was a black or Hispanic colleague, I'd say, yo, like, you don't think this is crazy? And that was the first lesson that I got, that I was young and ambitious and I was a young man on a mission. Everyone else mostly just needed to pay their bills. They did not join thinking, they did not analyze the issues. What do you need me to do? Okay, I'm gonna go do it. But one of the most beautiful experiences being on the job was being peers with white folks, because you might not realize it, but most black folks are not peers with white folks. White folks are usually our bosses, the person that determines if you get the job, the CEO, etc. So on the job, your white colleague is a peer. And when you're peers with someone, you get to have real conversation, a real human experience. And I started making good friends with a lot of white folks who I love to this day, my brothers and sisters to this day, outside of the blue identity, just human, you understand? And it was a breath of fresh air when they were questioning the shit too, especially those from Long Island. It was like 511, which is suspended license. One colleague said, out in Nassau, that's a summons. Or they'll just say, have somebody with a license come pick up the car. I'm like, really? I couldn't even fathom that you can get a summons for suspended license, because since I was 10 years old, I was watching people in my neighborhood be arrested for it. So I'm starting to piece everything together. And I'm like, wait, why are we being policed so aggressively in the name of keeping us safe? Because yes, if you police aggressively, are you going to get the shooter every now and then? Of course. But before you get that shooter, or while getting that shooter, you're going to get a lot of the people that you're trying to keep from getting shot, you know? And that's what I didn't understand. Like, so I was 22 and I'm like, now that I'm part of the blue, I can voice these opinions and we can fine tune the formula so that we are more surgical in how we get real violent criminals without having to affect everyone else. Because it's like, you're trying to get the needle in the haystack to protect the haystack from the needle. So you don't burn the haystack. You understand? And the way I see broken windows policing is we're burning the haystack to get the needle in the name of keeping the haystack safe from that very needle. To me, the purpose gets defeated. But I'll pause just so you could elaborate, ask more questions.
Well, first of all, you said it's a breath of fresh air. It's a breath of fresh air to listen to you. For one, it's a fantastic analogy. And you said you watch a podcast, so you know I love analogies. I always give analogies to different things, different movies. And for one, what I could say here is my analogy is always this. So for one, let me just circle back and say that absolutely, after hearing what you had to say, we have much more commonalities than I thought we did. So I would always say that the police department leadership is responsible for any positive contributions, but absolutely for any negative contributions to the community is the upper echelon. I always say there's no bad troops, there's only bad leaders. But unfortunately, it's the police officers, the boots on the ground, that are actually tangible to the public. They can't get to the actual leadership, but it's the leadership that's causing this problem. I think stop, question, frisk, which is a court case from 1976, People versus the War, I think is a fantastic tool if used properly. And what happened was it just completely got distorted. So my analogy is always this, is that the police department, instead of giving proper training and being surgical, as you said, and I love that terminology, and using precision policing, what they did was they just didn't train anyone, just threw out a giant net. We threw out this huge net, and we stopped everyone. And yes, we caught some big fish in that net, but we also caught a lot of little fish. And that is what really damaged and deteriorated that community and policing relationship, because it was a valuable tool that was used improperly. So I think a lot of people from hearing what you had to say immediately had the perception or assumption that you're going to say something that's completely based on race. But what I'm hearing is something completely different. And what you're saying is the problem that was distorted by quotas. And I remember, it's funny you said about Stapleton. So I grew up in Stapleton. I also worked in Stapleton with John in the 112 precinct. And the same thing like you, I had a 1 block foot post. It wasn't even the size of a full block. It was encompassing the Stapleton houses. And I remember the same thing. They told me 5 and 5. And that meant 5 summonses and 5 stop, question, frisk reports. I remember saying, how am I going to find 5 people in an 8-hour period on this small little block that I suspect is about to commit a crime? I mean, I would have to have a laser, and I have a pretty good observation skills, but I would have to have a laser sharp eye. So the problem is putting a quota on a valuable tool that distorted it. Let's just stop everyone. And then the lack of training. And the cops didn't really understand that stop, question, frisk was an actual court case. And they didn't understand, they never had the training to understand that when I'm actually detaining someone, that it's under the 4th Amendment. And then I actually have to do a stop report because this actually covers and explains why I detained this person and held them against their will. Well, they were actually doing the report when they were just engaging in conversations. So again, I thank you for that. So yeah, I want to say.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No problem. I want to thank you for that. But do you think there is a correlation between racist policing and quotas?
Okay. I do, because so there's a woman who's a friend. She's very, very conservative, but we are genuinely friends. She's like a mother to me, right? And we've had so many discussions for over 10 years, but her husband is not as astute, if you will. And he understood when we would discuss race, he would understand me up until the point that I explained systemic racism. To him, race is something individual. The way that it can be interwoven into policy, have the same racial outcome, despite what the individual feels about race, that was just a little too much for him to grasp. So regardless of, John, regardless of what you think about anyone's race, ethnicity, Eric, same thing. If you blindly enforce with the quotas, especially the way we do in particular communities, believe it or not, you're directly but unknowingly contributing to systemic racism. And this is a concept that's so hard for people to grasp. It's already interwoven in the policy because, I first learned this at funerals. It was a funeral for an officer. I think it was maybe my second funeral. I ran into it was like 3 years on the job. I ran into someone from the academy. I hadn't seen him since Madison Square Garden, right? December 2008. And it was like, oh shit, what's up, Ray? You still in transit? Yeah. And the third question, without fail, is some version of, what are they asking over there? What do they want from you guys over there? AKA, what's the quota where you work, right? And that's when I realized colleagues that went to certain parts of the city, there was one and a quarter, one arrest every 3 months. It'd be like, and if you didn't get it, it wasn't the end of the world. It would happen organically, security holding, different things that, domestic, it would happen organically, but it wasn't the end of the world. Whereas myself and colleagues that went into the hood, you better get those numbers. And intuitively, it might be, well, those other parts where there's no quota, are there bodies in the street? And there aren't, right? But in the hood, in the 7573, 3228, is it 120, wherever, I don't know what Stapleton is, 120, Stapleton? In these areas of the city, this is where the bodies are. So this is where this more aggressive policing is necessary. I get it, right? And that's not a terrible, terrible point. But the problem is we still have to be more surgical in how we do it. That fishnet that you just mentioned, Eric, it's not the way. I'm telling you, it's not the way. Our most successful arrests on this job have all been intelligence-based. It hasn't been broken windows. Intelligence, right? Investigations, with the district attorney's office, et cetera. And how do we get intelligence? We get intelligence from the people. When the NCO program was first introduced in 2015, 2016, an executive who I won't name said, shit, if we knew kissing babies would have, got us all this information to make these bigger colleges, we should have done this years ago. You understand? Because they realized a better relationship allows for intelligence. There was a massive shooting in Brownsville I think in 2019. I think 13 people were shot or something on Old Timers Day. The reason that case was solved so quickly, and thousands of people are out there, is because someone who witnessed the shooting called a retired community affairs officer who had retired from the job years ago. But that intelligence was able to solve that case in hours. Now imagine if it wasn't just community affairs that had the rapport, right? Because one thing I was taught by a so-called veteran was, you can't really be too buddy-buddy with people because they might have to be your summons next month. And then that's just a terrible way to see it. But as long as this is what the leadership incentivizes, this is how people are going to operate. So you said it, Eric. It's all about the leadership. And when you think about when I first spoke out, that's essentially all I did. I didn't bash cops. I put the spotlight on the leadership. I was under the impression cops would understand and appreciate that. But instead, I got called everything from a rat to a zero to, was it the rant? I was called a dreadlock savage. It was crazy. Some of it was funny. You understand?
Oh, still.
Yeah. Which is why, one of the questions I had for you both was, first, if you can acknowledge, and then if you can elaborate why you think that is. And if you don't acknowledge, if you think, what my observation is wrong, just elaborate on that. Many things that I've seen you both say, and when I'm driving or listening, and I'm like, yep, they got it, are things that myself and the 11 others, the so-called NYPD 12, are things that we said 6 years ago, but we're called rats. We're called all types of zeros and malcontents and disgruntled. So I'm like, wait. So when John and Eric says it, they're heroes. When John and Eric says it, they're speaking for tens of thousands. But when we said it, we were everything negative in the book. It's the same message. It's just the messenger that's changed. Why is that the case?
Yeah, I'll go first. I would say a lot of it's ignorance. I would say my own ignorance. When you started speaking out, I was like, oh, they're just a bunch of do-nothing cops. That is 100% my perception of it, the same way I had the perception of Schoolcraft until I actually heard the story. And then I was like, you know what? It's absolutely wrong what's going on. It's absolutely wrong. I will say that me and Eric, if you look at particularly the leadership of the NYPD, both past and currently, mainly men that are white guys, they deny me and Eric. We're crazy. We wear tinfoil hats. We don't know what we're talking about. The rank and file do, however, support our messaging. I can't speak for them. And I agree with you in part with systemic racism. Where I believe that your short side is on broken windows itself. I believe broken windows as a strategy, if deployed indiscriminately throughout every borough in New York City or throughout the nation, no differences amongst how we police the strategies we use on the street. And I do believe that the community should be a part of what minor crimes we are enforcing. I believe that each community should say, well, hey, listen, I don't want kids drinking in the park. Or you know what? They just got to get out of there by 12. Whatever those parameters are, we serve the people. I believe that the pathway to public safety is through enforcement. I do believe that. But I do believe there are parts of our criminal justice system and the police department that are systemically racism. I'm against bail reform, but I'm pro common sense bail reform. I mean, if a guy can't pay to get out for a minor crime and he's going to spend time in jail and lose his job, that is systemically racist to me. And I won't even say, and to me, again, my father grew up without a father on the Lower East Side in the projects. His mother had severe mental illness. He grew up in extreme poverty. So any situation that would, like, the average poor Black person would have faced in New York City, my father would have faced the same exact situation. So I believe it's more of a poverty discrimination. Because just growing up in New York City, I believe that racism is truly ignorance. Right? Because I've interacted with every ethnicity. When I actually sit down and I talk to people who make racist statements or inflammatory bias statements, after I was speaking to them and questioning them, you're like, wow, this guy's just completely ignorant. He's never branched outside of his community. He's never interacted with other cultures. So I believe that I believe that broken windows is a good system. I believe quotas are a heavily, heavily, heavily failed system. And it's pushed back in every community. Because again, I was stopped every day, dude. If I was playing basketball and the sun creaked down, I was getting a C summons. I was getting tossed. I was getting all that. And it's the same thing. And then after the 120, I got sent to the 123 after impact. And it was the same thing with the quotas. And I was an active cop. I remember a month. My partner had 14 arrests. I had 7. We had 10 days on patrol. We solved a citywide burglary pattern and a borough grand larceny pattern. In that same month, we only had 10 days on patrol, and we were getting asked, "Where's our 2250s?" And I'm like, we don't even take 20 robberies in this command for a year, but you want me to stop 20 people a month that I suspect of and I'll like those things. I believe really pushed throughout the whole city. I do agree with you. In Black and brown communities, they are enforced harder and there are more cops there. But I don't know, and I haven't heard another way when crime is high. And by deploying broken windows, we did see communities change in part. So that's my take on it.
Okay. And Eric, just jump in. I want to go back. I want to let Eric do his thing.
Absolutely. First and foremost, I like to break this up into two components here. So the first question you're asking is, why did yourself amongst the 12 get this flack and we didn't? Well, I will tell you this. We're getting controlled constantly, and we are actually getting some opposition, actually a lot more than we expected, because we're out here fighting for the cops, and we're fighting for better leadership. But I think the problem lies in this, and I've been saying this forever, is the job, and when I say the job, I mean the leadership of the job. People always say, oh, the job. And you know what I used to say? Well, who is the job? The job is us. Exactly. The job is the leadership, right? So I blame everything on leadership. And I think the problem is that the people of the job, they don't actually rely on their own information, and they lack communication. And the job is based on the rumor mill. So you, amongst the 12, became like these boogeymen, just like I was in the Bronx, where people didn't get an opportunity to actually communicate with you. They only heard the scuttlebutt. You know, those guys, they do nothings. They don't want to do nothing. They're just racist. They came on the job because they want to skate through and they want an easy time. And I saw you do several interviews, and I actually said, well, he sounds quite different from what I've heard. So I think this job really lacks communication. I think they should have encouraged yourself and others to actually speak to different cops throughout the precincts, maybe amongst the unit, because communication is the key to success. And I say opposition beats opportunity, but it's through communication. And the job silences everyone, and that's actually a huge mistake. I think silence is part of cowardice, and that creates more animosity. Now, along with that, I'm sure you know I'm a big component of intrusive police work. I was a crime sergeant, special operations lieutenant, active cop. I'm a very huge component of intrusive police work. Now, there are some people on this job, particularly leadership, they hate when I say that. They like to hear the words proactive policing, but I believe it's intrusive police work, because that's what it is. People versus the board is a court case that gives cops the right to be intrusive, based on the law, which I think is much different when we talk about proactive policing. So the problem, again, I think, comes down to not racist. I don't think it's racist policing. I think it's bad leadership. The leadership is competent and lazy. So if we had excellent leadership, we wouldn't have to have quotas, because the three of us, if all three of us right now had 24 cops and we broke 8 apiece per person here as leaders, it would be our job to ensure that we know who the cops are, that they know their geographical area of employment, that they know the crimes that are going out there, that they know who the players are, and that they target the correct specific people that are causing the problems in that particular area, right? Because most of the people, and I grew up in a black neighborhood. Most of the people are good people, but the cops don't know that, because they don't have the good leadership to guide them in the right direction. As you said, they're told 5 and 5, 4, 10 and 10. So it's bad leadership. They're not actually making sure that they understand good police work. Again, I think intrusive police work, it comes down to good and bad leadership. And unfortunately, we have weak leadership, and with weak leadership, you have to have quotas. So I used to tell the guys this, very simple. Well, I'm not giving you a quota, but you have to ask yourself, right? If you're working in an area where there's robberies and shootings happen, you have to be out there and you have to engage the people, and you have to look to stop those robberies. So if you were working at BMW and you were in a position of sales, and if you went 1 month without selling a car, well, that's possible. And if you went 2 months, but after 3 months, are you really a salesman? So it's the same thing. If you work in a particular area, there's robberies and shootings. If you have a 3-month period and you're not doing any actual police work, what impact are you making? But the impact that they're making is just a number, and it just really withdraws from the actual good police work, not because of troops, because of bad leadership. And if we had good leadership that were actually trained and understood leadership skills, I think we'll remove that problem with this racist ideology of policing.
Great, absolute great point. I'm gonna have a few rebuttals. I'm gonna go backwards and work my way to the beginning. But first, if I steal it, don't call at me. But the intrusive police work versus proactive. I've pushed back on the definition of proactive, but I've never had a definition for what they consider proactive. So I'm gonna start saying intrusive. I give you the quote. All right, I give you the credit for it. Because there's so many ways to be proactive. It's actually a very ambiguous term. There's so many ways to be proactive. So to only, minimize being proactive to just activity, that I used to always push back on that. So going backwards, the analogy, as someone who loves analogies also, I do challenge your analogy using BMW, because the difference between private sector, profit-driven, you probably already see where I'm going. This is a tax-funded public good. It's incomparable to something that answers to quarterly dividends and stockholders and shareholders, et cetera. It's just, we cannot compare a public good to something private like that. So there are similarities, but this is where the difference, I think, is it's too contrasting to make that comparison. So now just speaking about broken windows in general. So I stopped short of saying I support broken windows because I don't support it as a whole. But come on, common sense. If you're stopping folks, if you're interacting with folks, is there a benefit to that in public safety? Anyone who says there isn't is not being realistic, right? But this is where I think we need to be, what I think we need to do, John. And I've heard you say it so many times. I've read it all over Twitter. No one has been able to offer something, something alternative. So this is not the whole answer, but when I had my platoon after first being promoted, obviously commanders were afraid to have that conversation with me about numbers. But at the same time, I'll never forget the car that I was using was in the shop. So I was using an unmarked car, the ICO's car. And I was going around scratching. For those who don't know, that's when you just check up and inspect your platoon, your officers. And the car in front of me was one of my guys I was getting ready to inspect, but I didn't want to stop him until after the traffic light. As we're waiting, so there was a car at the crosswalk, the officer's car, and then my car. And as we're waiting for the queue, the light was green, but there was a lot of traffic on the other side. A car cross traffic just eats the red light. So finally, when the traffic starts to move, I'm expecting my officers to make the right turn. They kept going straight. I'm like, whoa, I know they saw that because I saw that and I'm behind them. So when my driver hits the siren, they pull over. Hey, what's up, boss? You want to scratch? Sure, but I was just behind you, and I saw that car go through that light, and I was expecting you to make the right. I was going to make the right with you and back you up. It's like, yeah, man, these fucking drivers. What do you mean? You're a cop, man. What do you mean these fucking drivers? Like, it's your job to make the stop. Now, and the officer got very nervous. His lip was shivering, especially coming from me because I'm the guy that's anti-numbers, but I'm not. Doesn't mean anti-work, right? Here's why I say broken windows is usually innocuous infractions, right? Minor things. So the way I see it is the more minor, the wider the range of discretion. But I still want you to at least make the connection, make the stop. Do the encounter. Just maybe the person's having a bad day, they didn't realize they made a mistake, but at least still engage. Now, I'm not going to hold you accountable and say you're the worst cop in the world just because you didn't issue that summons, but I still expect you to at least engage with that person. And and that's what I told my platoon. I don't care if you give. Now, granted, if you run the person's name and it's absolute reason to make the arrest, that's an issue. But I don't care if you give discretion every day. I want you out there at least engaging with the public. You understand? And because if there's any benefit to broken windows, the constant stops, I think we still get it, John, without having to write that summons. If you need discretion. So, but here's the pushback. People are going to take advantage of that, and they're never going to change their behavior. So this is something that I actually offered the leadership last year. I had a meeting, and I said, we need an official warning system. And I worked on re-engineering 2014, and this is something that my mentor and I tried to implement. Bratton said it wouldn't work. We were going to create a radio code because we said they're never going to get off numbers. How about we change what the numbers are, right? How about, for lack of a better word, the cop gets the credit for making the stop, even if it doesn't end in a summons or arrest. So how do we do that? We create an official warning system that allows you to give discretion, but it's documented, right? And for folks in civil liberties, et cetera, that have issues with the records, we can create a fair time that it purges itself as long as you don't reoffend. That way, if someone's driving north on, Flatbush Avenue, and you stop him, John, at Church Avenue in the 6-7, and he says he's rushing to the hospital, you document the discretion, you let him go, but then he's in Empire Boulevard still driving, and then Eric stops him. We can see, hey, you were driving at a high rate of speed, you were given discretion 10 minutes ago, but you might decide to still give him the discretion. But then he's about to enter the Manhattan Bridge, so obviously he lied, and now I stop him. At that point, it's time for the summons. You know, we've documented it. There are those that are going to learn, they're going to change their behavior. But for those that don't, we have it documented. And I call it informed discretion, right? That was you have to come up with names for these things. And I think any benefit to broken windows, we still get because we are making the stops. We are making the engagement, but we can be fair to the public and not have to hammer the public needlessly for widgets on a spreadsheet. So let me see. Yeah, and also I do want to one of the facts. So broken windows, when it's implemented in the 90s by Bratton, Giuliani buys into it. I believe it's more serendipitous, right? A pleasurable coincidence, because crime does start to plummet. But if you watch crime nationally, it plummets everywhere. And Jay, I refuse to believe that aggressively enforcing the squeegee men and bikes on sidewalk is causing the crime to drop all over the country because it's happening aggressively in the 5 boroughs, specifically San Diego. And I implore everyone to look into the data for this. You can find it easily, a 40-year history of crime in San Diego. San Diego's plummet in crime was even steeper than New York during the implementation of broken windows in the mid-90s. And San Diego has never implemented broken windows. So again, am I saying to ignore minor infractions? Never. And I had a commander when I was a lieutenant that said, Edwin, I want to let you know, you have reminded me, always do your research, always take everything with a grain of salt, because I would have never imagined that you are who you are. We had maybe 4 gun collars as a morning lieutenant. It's hard to get a gun arrest in the morning, period. So morning lieutenant, my platoon had 4 gun arrests, and we did our jobs accordingly without having to hammer the community. So that's my pushback a little bit, and that's my agreeing. Let me know what you guys think.
Yeah, sure. So here's my take, right? I agree with enforcing minor crimes, but I don't agree with throwing out a net and always enforcing minor crimes. So I was a crime sergeant. I get a young guy on my team. This is first. He starts late in the month. He's got to get his 2 collars, right? Calls me, oh, boss, I got one over here. I'm like, what do you got? I got a gravity knife. I go over there. It's a guy with a construction helmet, tools on his belt, and a gravity knife in his pocket. I'm like, what happened? He goes, he just came off the train in plain view, gravity knife, Spanish guy. I was like, all right, do me a favor. Take him out of cuffs, write him a 250, let him go. And he's like, boss, I got to get my numbers. I'm like, this isn't your guy. He's coming home from work. Now I'm a big proponent of, and I know you're gonna have what you're gonna have to say about this, but please let me finish. I'm a big proponent of, I need to know who this person is to see who I'm going to enforce. Now, if this guy's coming from work and he's got a huge criminal record, there's still no benefit to arresting this guy, right? Because he's trying to do the right thing. I did not prevent a crime that day by arresting him. Now, however, if we have robberies on that same block and there are kids hanging out, drinking, smoking, targeted enforcement using broken windows, and they're doing minor crimes, and I stop them for a minor crime, I believe there's a huge benefit to enforcing minor crimes, both in intel gathering and prevention of crime. So when I say broken windows and enforcement of minor crime, I'm 100% with you. I say all the time, I don't even know why we give half the people the summonses and arrest half the people that we arrest. It's zero benefit for public safety. It's solely driven on either putting dots on the map for a CO or to create funds for the government to use. I don't believe in that at all. I believe in heavily targeted enforcement and then honed down. And is that harassment? Absolutely it is. I believe in the term of harassment, it would fall into that. But I believe that is the pathway to public safety. That creates a safer society. That's what I believe when I say that. When I'm saying broken windows, I'm not saying just throwing out that net and smashing everyone, because I agree. Yes, that'll deter a lot of things. But I'm not for a police state. I'm not. I believe in the founding of this country. I believe in individual liberty. I believe people are human. How am I going to write you a summons for something that I do every day? It's like things like that. But at the same token, if I'm out there shaking people down, robbing people, going after each other, shooting at each other, doing things like that, I believe that yes, the law enforcement should have an eye on me and be targeting.
I actually don't disagree with you there. I don't disagree at all. The problem, I think, is the common sense that you have to do it that way. It's most people don't. And second, the leadership doesn't care whether you do it that way or you do it any other way. What they just want to see the widgets on the spreadsheet. If we can move away from that, then we can have that balance. And I'll never forget, June 2020, George Floyd protests, working 19 hours a day, barely no sleep. I'm getting called also you get called racist, I get called coon and house nigga, you name it, right? And then the captain's union releases a manifesto, if you will, where they're begging Commissioner Shea to get rid of CompStat. That was probably the biggest vindication that I've ever had, because everything in that letter is everything that I had said 4 years prior and was called every negative thing in the book for. So how is it that we now have the commanding officers union echoing the language that I was saying 4 years prior? So I think even they realize that pressure on them to then pressure the lieutenants, us, to then pressure the sergeants and the cops leads to this, again, are we going to get those guys that you just explained? Of course, at times, but in the pursuit of numbers for numbers' sake, we get everyone. And inevitably, everything aligns terribly. And we have that situation that goes viral. And who's left? Who's the hashtag? Who becomes synonymous with racist and racist policing brutality? That individual cop. The chief asking for those numbers, they're in climate control rooms in one police plaza. You never know their names, right? They get to walk into community events, kissing babies. Everyone's happy that they're in the room. Meanwhile, they're responsible for what you just saw. And, and that's when I realized, I'm actually speaking for more than just the community. A few years ago, I realized I'm actually speaking for the cops also, which is why, PSA 2, I was very shocked when my own officers went to IAB and said that I was essentially not arresting people because they were Black. It was such an oversimplification. It was a situation where it came over as a robbery. So obviously, I was on my way to relieve the desk, but it was a robbery. So I called my boy on the desk. Listen, I got to go to this job quick. I'll come relieve you. When I get there, the officer's like, listen, it's not a robbery, boss. It's a domestic criminal mischief. Ex-girlfriend, baby mama, saw her, her child's father in a car with another woman and kind of attacked the car. He got out, she ran. And rather than do anything to her, he called 911, said it was a robbery because he wanted a quick police response. My guys get there. The suspect is 90Z, is gone on arrival, the woman, but her mother's on the scene, right? The other woman that was in the car also runs because she's afraid that this woman took like a bat or something and broke the mirrors of the car. So I get there and they tell me, they update me on what the job is. And the woman is not on the scene. So I tell the mom, it's best that you get your daughter back to the scene because she will be arrested in the future. She has children. If she's the only one with the children, ACS can get involved. It's a nightmare. She calls her daughter to come back on the scene. I walk over to the individual, the victim. I said, listen, bro, good job not trying to take matters into your own hand. Good job calling 911. It's going to be handled. She will be arrested. And he's venting, right? And then at some point, he was like, you know what, man? Y'all don't got to arrest her. She's just mad that I moved on. I was like, are you sure? I was like, what about your car? He's like, this shit ain't cost no money. You know what I mean? So that's when I tell my guys, hey guys, I tell them, I think I told them 91, like a signal to them, like he doesn't want her arrested. That 91 will come back and haunt me, but I'll explain. So that's when the officers come to me, privately, and they're like, oh boss, while we were waiting for you to get here, we ran his name and she actually has an order protection against him, so we're just going to get him instead. Now, this thing has caused controversy because some people said, order protection, it's out of my hands. And others said, no, this is not a scenario where there was criminal contempt. Like the order protection, it exists, but it wasn't violated. And I don't know what your discretion is on that, but my discretion was, given the circumstances here, he did not violate the order. This isn't her address. He's in Brownsville. She doesn't own Brownsville. She walks up to his car and damages his vehicle. Like, my discretion was, she's the perp, not him. But some said, order protection, it's out of our hands, that's it. So when they told me he's been collared 25 times, to kind of change my mind, I said, not good information, but it doesn't change the circumstances. And one thing about me, I like to mentor, right? I like to guide folks in the right direction. So I then pulled him aside. I'm like, listen, brother, you just told me you have children and you out here getting arrested so much. He was like, you know how it is. I grew up in the hood. I said, listen, I'm from Flatbush. I get it. But you don't belong in jail, brother. You belong out with your kids enjoying your life. Like, you got to make better decisions. So that conversation, guys, was manipulated into, you don't belong in jail. I'm going to let you, I'm going to make sure they don't arrest you. I'm the fucking sergeant. I don't like, you think this is where, like, you think an order protection is where I'm going to, even if I had that's terrible biased views. You think this is the scenario that I'm going to use to exercise those views? You understand? So they went to IAB and, you get the discovery. I mean, Eric, you face charges, I think, right? Eric?
8 sets in 1 year.
Wow. So what they don't know is you get the discovery. So I'm literally reading the transcript of, there were some cops I automatically knew they were involved with going to IAB, but others I was like, wow, man, you're laughing in my face every day, asking me if I want anything for breakfast, if I want coffee at the deli, but you're sitting here saying that I'm biased, I'm flawed, I'm biased, I'm racist, and that was very shocking, man, because it's like, if it's some cop in Staten Island or in the Bronx who's never worked with me, who saw a snippet of something and, reduces me to a rat, I get it. They're wrong, but I get it. But you've worked with me. You see, two of the cops, they had young daughters, right? One of them got the day off for his daughter's birthday. The other didn't, right? So I told them, come in. I'll give you lost time from the desk. I'll let you leave early. That way, it's a little trick that we do to make sure you're still part of the manpower. And what did I do, John and Eric? I picked up all the jobs in his sector as the sergeant so he can get the day off. So imagine 3 months later, he goes to IAB. It's like, I was just shocked, man. And I actually ran into him in the academy. And he actually came over and spoke to me and apologized and said he was being coerced by the delegates, but that's a whole different discussion. But that's when I realized, man, people misunderstand me so much that they're willing to try to destroy my career. And it's crazy because the number one thing that delegates had to represent officers for was activity-based. Performance monitoring was 90% of the people in performance monitoring was for activity. After my fight, right, me and the others, after the film, after after our fight, performance monitoring, like, there's no one in there for activity anymore. The delegates are essentially just barely having to do their jobs because that was one of the main reasons they have to represent folks. And this is something I wanted to get out there because one of the biggest mistakes I did, right, when that article came out, I immediately, the Daily News called, it came out on the Post, the Daily News called me. I was ready to tell my story, but the union said, it's an open investigation. This is bullshit anyway, just leave it alone. Biggest mistake I made because as I would get transferred to different parts of the department, that bullshit article makes it there a week before me. So everyone has that article in the back of my mind. Watch out for this guy. He's a rat. He's racist. And it's only after 2-3 months of working with me, they're like, you know what? Fuck all that shit that I heard about you. You tell me, you let me, like, I'm in your corner, boss. You understand? And by the time I finally responded to that article, it was 9 months later. One of the biggest errors, this is why I always tell people, speak your voice, say what you have to say, which is why, again, I commend you guys, especially not being afraid to point the finger at the top. I think that's where we connect the most. You guys have not been afraid to call out the top, particularly what we're seeing with, the khaki pants crew, and the shit that they're doing, and they're being misguided. We're not focusing on them because they're being misguided. They're impressionable. They're young. They're malleable. It's the leadership. It will always be the leadership. And I think that's the message that we have to get out there more than anything else.
You know, listen, you said some fantastic stuff. It's obvious you're an extremely intelligent guy, and I respect everything you say. And again, there is so much commonality amongst the three of us. We have a lot more similarities than differences. And we can see why we all worked on the same job. We actually all want the same thing. We want public safety, we want camaraderie, we want morale, and ultimately, what's the one thing that we all want together? And the commonality is exactly there. We want good leadership. And John and I have been so expressive about this, and I'm so glad to hear what you're saying. Again, you look at every organization in this world, and any organization that is successful and thriving, it's by good leadership. And this organization, unfortunately, eats its own, and it's riddled with weak, poor, and inadequate leadership because they lack training. Most of the chiefs in the NYPD get to the position that they're in by nepotism and also because they hung around long enough. They lack the training, the skills, and they actually lack the compassion and care for doing public safety. Do they actually care about public safety or self-serving for their own careers? And ultimately, it's about self-serving, because if they really cared about public safety, they would drill down and actually have ideas. You know, for instance, what you're saying here about the ideology of documentation of warnings. I like it in some aspects. I think it would have to be tailored down because there's one warning, there's two warnings, but I do like the idea that you're being innovative. And in most cases, most of the inadequate management that we see in the NYPD is not innovative for public safety and for what's for the community. It's innovative for what's in the best interest for their own careers. And that's where I find it extremely problematic. So we've all started out in this job, which is similar for all of us, Operation Impact. And Impact was supposed to be have an impact on a particular area by flooding us. Again, it goes back to what I was saying, throwing out this big net. But what Operation Impact should have been, and this is what I used to tell my personnel, is when you have an encounter with someone, if it's a summons, if it's an arrest, or just an actual detainment or a conversation, you should ask yourself what is the impact of this encounter going to have on public safety in the community? So if I have an interaction, exactly what John was saying, if I have an interaction, I make an observation. You know, I have a subject walking down the street, and I observe them in possession of a knife on their belt or in their pocket. When I have an encounter with this particular suspect, what is the impact going to be if I have a conversation? What's the impact going to be if I make the arrest? What's the impact going to be if I write a summons? That's what I believe policing should be about when it comes to intrusive police work. It's ultimately, what's the impact? If someone I stop and they're in possession of a knife, as John said, and they're coming from work, and if I arrest this person, I don't make any impact on public safety. Actually, what I do is I make a negative impact because I just deteriorate the relationship with myself and the community. But if there is a young man who we know we've had numerous interactions with, and he's on the verge of getting into that criminal lifestyle, or he's living, and this is what I accomplished numerous times, especially also living the 112, is some of the kids don't want to be part of this criminal activity, but they're forced to, especially working in PSA 7, the confines of the 4.0. If you live in the Patterson projects, directly across from the Mott Haven projects, you're forced to join a gang because otherwise you can't travel. You can't play basketball just stuck in your house. So if I stop someone like that in possession of a knife, if I make that arrest, what impact did I make? But if I have a deep, meaningful conversation, maybe that one will have an impact. And I used to take part in the basketball games constantly myself to have an impact with these kids. Again, it comes down to leadership, and we all agree on the commonalities. Just weak, inadequate leadership. I think it needs to be stripped down from the top. There has to be training constantly. Even as these elderly chiefs age, they have to be involved in training, and their mindset has to evolve as the technological era evolves. Most of these high-ranking poor management that we have in the NYPD, they don't understand social media.
Oh, did we just lose Eric?
Bro, but again, I really appreciate your ideology. I think we're all on the same path here.
Yeah.
John, did it freeze?
Yeah,
For a little bit.
Oh, okay.
After social media, you froze. Just finish that point.
Yeah, I'm saying unfortunately, there becomes a huge separation with the weak, inadequate leadership and what's going on in the street with young people and also the police officer that understands social media, they're not evolving. And that comes down to weak, inadequate leadership, incompetence, and laziness.
It actually makes me think of something. And John, correct me. I listen as much as I can. I read it even more. It seems, I see which administrations you criticize. From my observation, I could be wrong. I see very little, if any, criticism on the Bloomberg-Kelly administration. And before you answer, I just want to throw two things. Kelly reprimanded a lieutenant for creating a social media page. I think the lieutenant was in Manhattan. So that's an example of the leadership just not understanding evolution, technology, etc. And now you have to have a social media page and put every gun collar on it, right? Second, the Kelly administration specifically, because Bratton starts this, from what I see, the issues and that disconnect, but Kelly and Bloomberg exacerbate the issue. And whenever the numbers will come into question, Kelly would just stare into the camera. But then Bloomberg said it in one of his radio addresses, but then Kelly said it in private, which is actually something that the current mayor testified in the stop and frisk trial. So the current mayor testified in the trial and shared this, which the judge, in her opinion, said was part of the reason why she ruled the way she did. Kelly's words, specific words that Bloomberg echoed, was the reason for the numbers is to make it too hot to carry. Their thought is, we're never going to get every illegal gun, but if we can create an atmosphere where you keep it in the shoebox because you're constantly getting stopped, this is the atmosphere we need to create. Now, I can see the common sense appeal that has, but what it fails to do is take into consideration the collateral damage, the externalities, the people that are not carrying illegal guns, the people that don't live a life of violent crime that have to be caught again, Eric, in that web, in that net. So that's the justification that the Kelly Bloomberg administration gave for being hyper numbers focused, to make it too hot. If you're young and black and you're in Brownsville and you've been stopped and frisked twice a week, right? And you're a construction worker, it's annoying, it's harassment, it's causing a wedge between you and the police. If you're a young shooter in that same Brownsville and you've been stopped twice a week, the thinking is going to make you think twice about bringing that gun out. Obviously, the wedge between you and the department, folks don't care as much about because you're committing violence out there anyway. So that's my criticism to that administration. I think they exacerbated it. And, us being hired during that administration, think about it. We're young, most likely in our 20s when we get hired, right? We're impressionable. And you see your ability and your willingness to challenge the leadership today don't start today. I challenge it back to Mayor Lindsay in the 1960s. Like, who's to say that chief, when I was in the academy with my recruit bag, was any better than the chiefs now? Granted, when you're young, impressionable, it's a paramilitary organization. You're under the impression that person in that leadership position deserves to be there, belongs there, right? Because you're forced to see them in this great light. But I think they had it wrong also, specifically with just exacerbating the numbers game and being hyper broken windows focused, not in the surgical way that you've explained, but in the way that, unfortunately, we know that it gets carried out.
Sean, you mind if I jump in for a second? I just want to say, we actually did a focus on Mayor Lindsay's administration where we interviewed Detective Randy Jurgensen, former Detective Randy Jurgensen, who wrote Circle 6. And we talked about the correlation between what's happening now, between what happened in the Lindsay administration. And particularly, the focus was on the incident at the mosque where we lost Philip Cardillo.
I have the book right there. Yeah.
Oh, you do? Okay. What a great book, right? Fantastic. I don't know if you had an opportunity to see the interview, but it's pretty sharp.
Yeah.
If you can, pretty sharp guy. He's much older now, but he still has his wits. He remembers everything about it. Great story. But I think John and I are pretty expressive and adamant about the weak and inadequate leadership that also goes on during the Bloomberg and Giuliani era. We're saying ultimately we think it was a great system, the broken window system, and there was more of a support system. I do agree that there was poor leadership because that correlates to this big net that they shouldn't have done, and the cops should have been better trained to understand stop and frisk. I think it was, you talk about being an inconvenient cop, I think it was a convenient time that they had a great support system and a valuable tool, and that was distorted and misused.
Oh, I agree. Listen, I have my criticisms of the current mayor, but one of the things that when people say I always push back on he was, I believe, on CBS, where he starts to explain, despite being one of the voices that pushed back against unlawful stop and frisk, he says, stop and frisk is a good tool. I believe that you should use it. And as he starts to get into the explanation of the constitutional parameters, his voice goes down and the voice of the reporter goes up. And I thought that was very manipulative, the way that CBS presented that. Because let's be honest, it is common sense, good police work if you have an exact matching description, right, running towards you in the direction that you're heading where there was just a shooting. If whoever says that you shouldn't stop that person is being unrealistic. But when I dissected that case, and the number one reason that people were stopped based on what they checked off on the form was furtive movement, right? And then Civil Liberties did a great job. They then asked 19 officers that wrote the most stop and frisk to define the word furtive, and no one could give the definition. You have to remember, when we are effecting stop and frisk, I know that shit was crazy. When you're conducting a stop and frisk, you are suspending the Constitution. Think about that. That is a great power. You are suspending the Bill of Rights, the Fourth Amendment in particular. That is nothing to play with, right? The power to temporarily suspend the Constitution to conduct an investigation. And yet you cannot define the word that you're saying is giving you the right for that suspension. Think about that, guys. I mean, you guys don't need any convincing, but some people like to push back and say that we just need blanket stop and frisk the way it was before, and it was wrong.
No, yeah, I think it's totally ignorant. I've spoken about it before. I don't know if I ever put it out. Most of my stuff I do is in tweets, so I'm always character limited. So I can only put out like a small thought, and I'll just pop it over on thing. But one thing I'll say is, yes, you're 100% right. Bratton starts broken windows, and you see the crime decrease. Bloomberg comes in, right? Kelly steps in, right? And what happens? As crime's decreasing, what are we doing? Our enforcement is stepping up. And I thought that was a huge failure. And that was what created a huge rift between not only the black and brown community, but every community in New York City. And the police department. It created a huge rift because it just didn't make sense, because these bad stops are happening. The reason I like broken windows is because I'm not stopping you based on my observation or based on a thought. I'm stopping you based upon probable cause. And I'm conducting an investigation after you already committed a crime. And that's something I always taught my guys. Whether you're a targeted repeat offender, you're a recidivist on the list, I don't want you stopping anyone unless they commit a crime. Whatever it may be, however minor or whatever, and we can investigate based upon that. I do believe in the Constitution, and I believe it. I don't believe we should just be rolling up and stopping people. I remember when I was a rookie in the 120, a kid I had arrested the night prior, who was a bad kid, I won't say his name on here, but he was dealing drugs, lived on Jersey Street. He's standing in front of his house. The CO of the 120 pulls up and goes, "Why is he standing there?" I'm like, "He lives there." And he's like, "Well, you didn't stop him?" And I'm like, "No." And, I got like the treatment that I was the worst cop in the world. Meanwhile, I had just locked up the kid the night before when he actually committed a crime. But I'm not going to stop somebody in front of their house. That's absolutely ridiculous. And that was under Bloomberg. And that was the type of stuff that was going on because it was putting dots on the map. It wasn't actually affecting public safety anymore. We were stepping up enforcement to make Comstat numbers essentially. And what we mean by dots on the map, for those of you that aren't police officers, is we're putting stops and documenting stops, summonses, and arrests in areas where crime is happening, but it might not be related to the crime that's actually happening. We're just putting the numbers there so that it's basically the CO could go up on Comstat and say, "Well, I have my guys there. Look, they're right there. Look at all this activity I have there. I don't know why it's still occurring, or it stopped because this is occurring." So I do believe they are just 100% as guilty. They're just less vocal. So I just don't jump on them because I don't really get the opportunity to as much. I have to kind of like correlate it to other things, and it's kind of hard. But yes, I believe the failure in broken windows actually did multiply under that administration particularly.
Got it.
100% do.
So as you were sharing that story with the CO, something came to mind. Someone I was in the police academy with, who eventually made his way to Staten Island. He had moved to Staten Island. He was transferred there. He don't, before becoming an official whistleblower, et cetera, I'd make my little comments on Facebook, et cetera. And he would always say, Raymond, you still out there saving the whales, get off your soapbox, just horsing around.
Yeah.
But then one day he called me. He said, you know what? I thought about you immediately. I said, what happened? He said, a week ago, he arrested a white kid in Staten Island with a book bag full of heroin. This is in 2014, before the opiate crisis is really out there, before everybody's giving Narcan. And he said the special operations lieutenant destroyed him because, quote, the collar was made outside of the zone, right? And what made him call me was because he was literally just finished processing an arrest for theft of service of a black kid that didn't pay his fare. And he got the high five from the lieutenant. He got the lost time he needed the next day. And he said it bothered him, because he's like, he's one of those folks that think race is something that's completely behind us. But he said it was just too obvious what it was at that moment. Heroin is literally, we have about 5 times more people that die from overdose deaths than homicides in New York City annually, right? So it's a very serious issue. And when I worked in the 8-3, that's what made me realize how bad this thing was. Because for the most part, throughout Brooklyn, we don't have that issue. But when I was in the 8-3 as a lieutenant, it was sad. It was mostly white folks who were from flyover states, gentrifiers, if you will, who, we had to make notifications over the phone to family members, and a lot of them were with roommates. It was sad. But he arrests a kid with a book, like 18-year-old with a book bag full of heroin. He gets screamed on. The same guy gives him a high five when he arrests a black kid for $2.50. Come on, Jay, Eric. Come on, guys. I mean, if there's a justification for that, please share it. I don't think there is. We have to be, we cannot ignore that. Like, think about it. You arrest a black kid, Hispanic kid, we talk about the fact that the Knicks suck and, life goes on. I've seen it every time. The rare occasion that you bring a white guy to the desk, you can hear a pin drop. Everyone's wondering who made the collar. What is he arrested for? When I would do prisoner transports, honestly, it looks like a slave dungeon, right? But the 1 or 2 white guys that will come through, the guy doing the search, all of a sudden he's looking through the arrest paperwork. Everyone else, he saw them, did his documentation, searched them. Whenever it's a white guy, we don't expect this treatment. And that, to me, is just at the surface level of how racism can exist, or bias, right? Bigotry and racism. So you have to be racist to be a bigot, but you don't have to be a bigot to be a racist. With bigotry, there's actually hatred there, right? With racism, it's more of a bias issue, and unfortunately, treating people differently because of that bias. It doesn't mean you hate them. So I stopped short at calling people bigots, although we have, there's space for everyone in this world. But the racism, the bias and the racism, the discrimination that can exist because of that, and not just in the way that the individuals treat people, but what can get written into the policy. Like, I personally don't think, I don't think a policy of aggressive numbers would ever exist in the white parts of this city, which is why when I first learned your story about how you were policed, I'm not gonna lie, it shocked me. I think you need to talk about that more, honestly, because a lot of folks don't expect that. But yeah, that's my anecdotal story about a situation in Staten Island.
No, I think it's a great story. And since we're going to talk about the topic of diversity, I'd like to start moving this on a little bit. And what I'd like to talk about is, so you were part of a documentary, Crime and Punishment, which came out in 2018. Am I correct? I think it was 2018, right?
Yeah.
For a commander to be promoted, it's all about those numbers being right. No matter how much crime increases, if arrests and summons increase with it and surpass it, you're doing a good job. It generates revenue for the city, those summonses. After school, 2 17-year-olds don't have their Metro cards, so they walk through the exit gate. That's quota food. But that's also a 17-year-old who's a year from college. You've affected their life in a negative way for maybe decades. I felt that I have to do what I can do to change this.
Which is pre-George Floyd, but I think 2018 is a pinnacle year where laws started to evolve, policy started to evolve, particularly with the Civilian Complaint Review Board, who I was a target of. But how do you think the comparison is from that time? You were part of a diverse group that was part of the crime and punishment, but you were all selected, you all went through an academy process to be part of the police department. And post-George Floyd, we've now lowered standards, part of this diversity, equity, inclusion movement. I personally think that is an insult to the black and brown community to lower standards, to have more black and brown people on the job. John and I talk about this all the time. I've worked with some black and brown folk in the police department who far exceed my skills. And if they were to get the job because of lower standards, I just think it's an insult and completely unfair. So I'm curious just to hear what is your take on the comparison to pre-George Floyd and post-George Floyd when it comes to diversity.
Yeah, fair question. Excellent question. The only thing is, when it comes to lower standard, just be specific, because the main thing that I'm seeing in terms of lowered standard was the physical requirement. I think it was the run. Was it the JST or the run? Something like that. That was done away with. I don't know if I interpreted it as specifically to increase black and brown. I just think since George Floyd, there's been a crisis in people leaving this job, and the numbers aren't what they used to be. And I remember, as commanding officer of community affairs, I've sat in on community meetings, and there's a disconnect, like a generational disconnect, where older homeowners in East New York feel that why should they have to wait excessive amounts of time for their needs when they call the cops? Meanwhile, the young folks is like, we don't want cops, and there's a big clash between the generations. But we have to explain to her it's because we don't have the workforce is much lower. So if you can just be specific in terms of what you felt was specifically done for the purpose of increasing black and brown folks, then I can answer the question better. Was it the run, or was it something else?
Well, for one, sure. We know it was documented, and also we actually saw in the papers about the physical standards being lowered for this part of the diversity, equity, inclusion movement. As far as any aptitude test, we haven't had any information on that. But we also know, because of all the recruitment ads and all the recruitment photos are totally elusive towards black and brown. I mean, you see some of these recruitment ads, it's a black female, it's a black male, it's a Hispanic male, Hispanic female. But we're not seeing any white males and females at all in the recruitment videos. So I think that. Yeah.
So I don't think the standards should have been lowered for any reason, because, and I think what I read is no one's going to have to run a mile and a half. It's not about running a mile and a half. It's about being in the shape to do it, which translates to being in the shape to get, to be able, so your heart doesn't stop if you do anything. You understand? Because let's be honest, we don't really have standards that require us to maintain our, a healthy lifestyle. And we've had situations where, unfortunately, we've lost members in the middle of action where their hearts have stopped. So I disagree that the standards should have been lowered. In terms of specifically focusing on minority recruitment, so if you can go back to every public statement I've ever made, you can watch every video. I have never been one of those, we need more diversity to solve the issues. I had a very early lessons on the job that made it clear that that's not the answer personally. Now, in terms of employment discrimination, if a black or Hispanic person wants the job, yes, you deserve the job if you want it and you meet the requirements, sure. But I, again, had that early lesson that, like, I'll be honest, my very first supervisor after the academy was he's retired, but I'll refrain from saying his name. He was an old school white sergeant. He was a detective. He had just made sergeant maybe a year before. And I would watch him, like, when the lieutenant wasn't in the room, he would tell us, like, you think you're saving the world with these collars? Like you think, the lieutenant told us if someone asked for a ride, to stop, question, and frisk them. That is not, you don't suspend the Constitution because someone asks for a ride. And this sergeant would tell us, if you bring that shit to me, I'm ripping up in your face. And I would see him rip up 250s and said, no, you don't do this. So it wasn't, meanwhile, the black sergeant was go get your numbers. So right there, I already understood diversity in itself was not the answer. Second, diversity has strength if it's used properly. I don't think this department uses it properly. I don't think most institutions do. The way to use diversity properly is, I can't remember which one of you said it, like the NYPD 12, as we're known as. Sit down with us, pick our brains, see, okay, you want to criticize how things are done? How do you think it should be done? Something that John says all the time. Okay, you want to criticize, and please show us the way. Because guess what? There are things that, because of my life experience as a young Black man growing up in Brooklyn, that I can add to the formula that can fine tune it, right? That you might miss because it's not your fault. We don't have the same life experiences. So in that sense, that's true diversity. Cosmetic diversity, which is what I refer to, is just getting more people on board just to say, look at the picture. I don't support that. And I don't think that's the answer. So again, if people are being denied the job and they fully qualified and it's because they are not white, that's a problem. But I don't think the answer is to just get people on board for the sake of it, just to say, look, we have a better picture. Listen, this is probably the most diverse this city has ever been, and we are not seeing the results that you would think we would see because of that. I made a post recently where folks told me I'm causing controversy, and listen, I'm not going to not call something out. I don't care who's in charge. I'm not, if it needs to be called out, it needs to be called out.
No, I respect that. And honestly, that's why I respect you a lot, because I think that we are of the same school of thought. Eric said it a while back. We're all treated, whether you're active, you're not active, you should be seen and not heard. Nobody wants to hear your opinion. And I think that's the exact wrong message. We coined the phrase on this podcast, we are the experts, but we didn't mean me and Eric. We meant you. From your eyes, as a lieutenant in the police department, you're the expert, not somebody in the media, not a politician who's never done this job. And same goes for any other profession. You're in that profession, you're the expert in that profession. So why is it that we cannot speak about what we see, the intricacies of it, especially to people that don't understand the intricacies of our profession? Exactly. And that's why I respect you a lot. And because we are of that thought. Hey, listen, we might not agree. We might be a little off in here, but we're going to hash it out. And at some point, we're going to meet in the middle. And clearly, you could see we're having this conversation. We don't even really disagree on it. We haven't disagreed on one thing. So I mean, and nobody would think that, including myself. You're a very misunderstood guy. You've always been misunderstood. Me and Eric were talking 2 nights ago. And I'll tell you the story that you had already cleared up. I'll tell you how I heard it. And Eric heard the same exact thing, word for word. You responded to an order of protection. A guy violated the order of protection, and you took him out of cuffs and said, we need more brothers like you on the street. Took him out of cuffs and sent him. And that's what I heard. And so did Eric. And so you cleared that up. Yes. So I appreciate you doing that, honestly, because that is something that has been circulating around this department for years. Yep. And I heard, and I said, if that's true, that's terrible. But it wasn't true.
Not at all. And let me add to that. A very conservative officer in PSA 2. We worked the detail together, and it's the first time I'd ever worked with him. I'd been in the command for 2 years, and maybe 4 hours into the detail, it was a hot day. So I told guys, look, listen, guys, work it out amongst yourselves. Get in the AC in the van. So I was in the van. He comes in and he's like, boss, can I talk to you? I'm like, well, yeah, what's up? He was like, I hope I don't regret saying this. He's like, but you're actually not a bad guy, man. I was like, the fuck? Like, what made you think I was a bad guy? This boogeyman. Bring me the one officer whose career I've ever hurt. I've never even written a CD, right? Bring me the officer whose career I hurt. And, we got into a very deep political discussion, very deep. And then we brought up the elephant in the room, the situation, that article. And then I showed him the printout from Central, the ICANN. And he was absolutely floored when he saw that it said that the suspect is a female Black, male victim states he's being robbed, because the article actually interviews that woman as if she's the victim the whole time. And he admitted to me, he was in the room when they were plotting this thing against me. But they delivered it to everyone else in the command like what you just said. So now that he's reading from the ICAD the way the job came over, that the man that called 911 was the victim the whole time. He was like, wow, man, like, thank you for showing me this. You know, we, like you said, we might not agree on everything, or we have different politics when it comes to certain things, but I feel good that I can stand firm and know that that's not what happened that day. You understand? So I do want to segue into, you know, the book is coming out October 17th. I ripped my chest open and poured my soul into this work. You know, and I truly hope that members of the service and the public alike take, you know, the tools that I've provided. Listen, even criticism, I'm open, which is what I respect about you guys. I remain dialectical. I don't know everything. If there's something that you need to shine a spotlight on, so you know, if I have a blind spot, please do, right? But I have poured my soul into this work. I believe that many of my activist peers, friends, right? Many of them have gone from reform to abolish, right? Some of them, they love me, but they won't take a picture with me anymore, right? They won't support me. They won't repost something that I've written because they get heat. Now that they're abolitionists, it's like, wait, so you want us to abolish police, but your man is a lieutenant? You understand? So privately, the support and respect and love is there, but they have completely gone in another direction in what they feel is needed to solve these issues. They're cynical. And had I not been on the job, John and Eric, I can't say that I wouldn't be in the same place they are. Because intuitively, you keep seeing this issue. It doesn't seem to be getting solved. We put money at it. We're getting more cops. We're supposedly changing training, and yet we're still seeing this issue. But thankfully, 15 years, I can stand firm and say that the job has the potential to be what people want it to be, what people expect it to be. It is a tax-funded public good. I know about the origins, right? But this whole country has those similar origins, and yet we don't say throw the whole country in the trash. At least most people don't, right? For the same way that someone, despite how dirty politics can be, someone can be ambitious and say, I'm going to run for office, and we support them. There's no reason why people that believe that policing can improve shouldn't be supported also. So on Saturday, October 14th, I am having this grand event, this experience in Brooklyn, in Flatbush at the King's Theater. And the reason why I'm calling it an experience is some people think it's a book signing, etc. Listen, I've gotten the top reviews in the industry. The book is going to be fine. This experience that I want to bring to members of the service and the public, you know, there's a lot of surprises. So I don't want to give it up. I want people to come in for an experience and leave empowered, knowing that we can actually work towards moving the needle, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, whether it's left or right. Members of the service, please show up. You know, when Crime and Punishment came out, we were there, right? People that were there to criticize and scrutinize were there. People that were there because they support me were there. This discussion, this experience that I'm planning for Saturday, October 14th, please be there. Some people have looked at the speakers and said, oh, there's some left bullshit, oh, fuck Sean King, etc. It is not what you think, right? Believe me, it's not what you think. It's not a panel. Everyone's going to say their piece. And I'm going to speak and make it clear that even though I respect everyone who's speaking, if you don't think Sean and I have our disagreements behind the scenes, then I wouldn't be a true ally. You understand? If you don't think me and the others have disagreements, I wouldn't be an ally. The brother of George Floyd, Terrence Floyd, is also one of the speakers. And he told me straight up, one of the most difficult things for him to explain to people is why he has a relationship with the police. Because they see him as, yeah, that was your brother, bro. That was your brother. You know, we were in the middle of a pandemic where everyone came outside and didn't care if they got sick because of your brother. And you out here rubbing elbows with the cops, yet he's going to be there, right? And he's going to say his piece. That day, you know, and I don't know how people feel about George Floyd, it's actually the day that George Floyd would have turned 50 years old. So he's going to be there as a tribute to his brother, but he's going to say his piece as to why he believes policing can work, because he's not an abolitionist. Him and I speak all the time. Please, guys, show up for this. It is not what you think it is. Show up and take notes. And please, I am open to criticism. Reach out. I hope to see as many of you there as possible.
I just want to say, piggyback again what John just said before, because I always say in this job, this department in particular, treats us as if we were children, and they want you to be seen and not heard. And I think that sometimes we talk about diseases in life and you say, oh, that, you know, that's a silent killer. Well, I think that's a silent killer to this department, is keeping us silenced. Today, we broke barriers, and we need more conversation as such. The public needs to see us convene. We need to convene with the public. And communication is the key to success. And what I learned from you also, John and I have been at odds with the unions. And to this day, I can tell you this, Edwin, if I would have listened to the advice of the union, I would have been terminated today. They gave me bad advice, and there's every reason for me to believe that the union was embedded with the Civilian Complaint Review Board and with the job, as far as they wanted me just to be silenced and go away. Just the same thing with your issue. They just wanted you to be silenced and go away. So with that, and same thing with John, with the vaccine mandate. John was very expressive initially when they started out with the mandate to ask questions. And immediately he was silenced, or at least they tried to silence him. So with that, I'm extremely proud of you. You showed nothing but courage that you're willing to speak out now and before. And again, I say opposition meets opportunity, but I think we have so many similarities and commonalities. And ultimately, we want the same outcome. And for that, I have nothing but respect. And you saying what you said before is another problem, where the brother of George Floyd having a relationship with the police and people saying, well, why would you talk to them? And again, it goes back to that old cliche saying of us and them. And John and I attend numerous CCRB monthly meetings, and we constantly hear this us and them mentality. And I think with communication, we could really strip that away and break that barrier. And cops have to stop just being seen. They need to be heard. We need to strip away from this ideology. Edwin, I have nothing but admiration for you. It's been a pleasure to meet you. Of course, I heard that story, and I know it's complete hogwash. I was suspicious of it before. This job loves rumors. It's sexy, but it's obvious after actually speaking with you, it's completely farce. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that.
Yeah, thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
Edwin, like I said, I hope everybody attends. I hope everybody reads your book. I know me and Eric are going to read your book. We're going to highlight it. We're going to go through it. We're going to analyze it. I hope you come back on after it. Absolutely. Before I let you go, I want to pick your brain on one more thing. Sure. We've been very expressive about the charge of criminal association, and I believe this is where you're highly misunderstood as well. I personally believe it's an easy out to attack you. I don't believe that cops should associate with criminals or partake in criminal behavior. However, people change, right? People change. And when someone's no longer involved in criminal activity, or maybe they are, and you have a personal relationship with that person, but you yourself do not partake in criminal activity with them, nor do you disclose your relationship is nothing other than a conversation. Because as an Italian, I believe that it's been used in the past specifically to target my community. Criminal association. Oh, your uncle was this, your grandfather was that. It's like, well, what does that have to do with me though? I work every day. I have nothing to do with me. I went to my cousin's wedding. We saw the political attack on Sal Greco, where he was fired for being friends with Roger Stone. What are your feelings about criminal association? Mm-hmm. Because it's very, you're a very public guy. You have a lot of celebrity friends, and some of them have past. I myself have a criminal past. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Good question. Important question. It's funny because as a rookie, maybe my first 4 years on the job, I would run into people. I was in transit. I would run into people taking the trains, and they'll say things like, hey, I used to be on the job. I was like, really? Yeah. What happened? And several of them, at least 3 or 4, it was criminal association why they got fired. And that's when I first understood that this was something that was being used. With Greco's situation, it's the first time I'd honestly seen a white guy go through that. And, people were very outspoken from Fox News, yourself, that it was a political hit. And it probably was, in my community, it's virtually impossible not to know a felon, man. It's just reality of poverty and what happens in the hood. But like you said, if you're not involved in whatever it is that they're doing, why should that be held against you? So I don't agree that. I think it's too broad, the criminal association. It has to be fine-tuned, more nuanced. Because at the same time, we don't want, where it's obvious that someone is a criminal, we don't want cops involved in that because it doesn't make sense. So I think it needs to be fine-tuned and more meticulous in how it's applied. An ambiguous blanket that allows, it's like a catch-all, right? As we say, it remains ambiguous so they can use it when they want to. The current mayor was affiliated with Mike Tyson after he was released. After he did his time, after technically became a felon, and so many other people. I remember when the Barclays Center first opened, it was like Jay-Z had consecutive concerts, and a lot of friends were there. A lot of people were there who have passed, and Ray Kelly was there throwing up the rock sign with them. You understand? So, are we going to scrutinize the commissioner for that? And so many other people have passed, but we do have to focus on what their lives are today. And if it's clear that they're not involved in criminality at the moment, think about the violence interrupters, for instance. Many of them, probably most of them, right, have those same paths, and yet they walk into precincts, they work with us, etc., and it's not an issue. So because of the nuances, which is the fact that they have changed their lives, they're in a different direction, etc. So if all those circumstances exist, I don't think a member of the service should be scrutinized and face discipline and be fired for that purpose. But the circumstances have to be there also.
There's one more question that I wanted to ask you that coincides with that.
Yeah.
So I've been pretty adamant and expressed about being a catalyst for change for CCRB and the discipline matrix. Mm-hmm. So what is your take on the discipline matrix that made its inception from former Commissioner Shea in 2021?
Yeah.
Have you read it? What is your perception, and what do you think about the actual discipline matrix?
Yeah, good. Real good question. I still remember. I think it was the current borough president of Queens who was the council member that pushed that bill, and essentially because he was the public safety. He was in charge. He was the chair of public safety, and that's what we got from that. So if you aggregate the data, right? If you look at CDs and discipline, when it's just this commander or this precinct and this person, giving out what the discipline is for a particular violation of the patrol guide, no one's paying attention. But when you put the data together, you do start to see a bias, right? Where a white guy, same exact thing in Staten Island, does, a black cop in the 113 does it, and one is hammered and the other one is given a slap on the wrist. So the matrix essentially eliminates that. It creates what's supposed to be impartial. So in that sense, just like with any law book where there's reprimand, you have to make it clear what the consequences are. When you make it too much of a range, either from up to 5 days, up to 10 days, etc., it has to be more nuanced. My criticism, though, is what those reprimands are. Where do they come up with what the discipline should be? I think that needs to be revisited, because some of the things that are there, what the reprimand is, to me, are egregious. You understand? So that's what I question about the matrix. But the need for the matrix to exist, I think it's fair. I think it makes sense with, again, any law book, any rule book. You have to make it clear what the consequences are. And before, it wasn't clear, which is why we had such wide bias. And it was a little embarrassing that was supposed to be one department, but the same exact behavior was being treated so different. But at the same time, that's exactly how the policy reflects to the public. So to me, it's really not that shocking that it happens internally. So that's my thoughts on the matrix.
Well, I would say this. I agree that we need some type of documentation to show that there's equitable discipline amongst the department. But what you're saying that there's some type of discipline towards bigotry and could be correlated with racism. John and our argument is that this discipline matrix leaves too much room for nepotism. And I think that what you're saying, it could actually leave room for racist and bigotry ideology the same way, because it's broken up into three columns, right? You have your middle column, which is your automatic discipline. But to the left, if you're former Commissioner Shea's son, you're going to get the mitigating factors, which is the lowest penalty possible. Mm-hmm. But if you're Sal Greco, you get the aggravating factors and ultimately terminated. So that's where I think this leaves too much room for potential nepotism and bigotry is what you're saying. If there's actual bigotry, it would be the same thing with the discipline matrix. Would you agree on that?
That's a fair argument. And that's where the fine tuning needs to be to make sure it's truly equitable, truly impartial. Unfortunately, subjective, once there's room for anything to be subjective, human beings will be human beings. And this is why we have to write it as objective as possible to take out that subjectivity, because unfortunately, as you said, nepotism, cronyism, these are things that are rampant in the department. We learn it very early, and it continues to be an issue. I can't wait to be back, guys, honestly. I can't wait. John, Eric, just hit me up. Let me know when to come back. I think we have a lot more to discuss. And honestly, this needs to be on a national forefront, because policing as a whole gets scrutinized no matter where the incidents happen that become viral. So off camera, let's talk some ways that we can get this discussion on a national level, with everyone in the room, wherever they fall on the spectrum.
100%. Listen, we did an hour and 40 minutes where me and Eric are probably one of the biggest proponents of broken windows policing out there on the national stage talking about it. And what people would say is you're against broken windows, right? And what did we see in an hour and 40 minutes? We haven't disagreed on one thing. Nothing. There wasn't one part of our conversation that really, we're all right around the same thing. And I think when we speak nationally, that's what we'll see. The fringe on both sides is very fringe, small minority, where I always say I'm a moderate. People say I'm a right-wing extremist. There's more Republicans that have me blocked on social media than there are Democrats. I go in. I don't discriminate. I'll go after you if I think you're calling bull. I can't say enough about how much I respect you and the courage it took for you to speak up at the time you did. So even though at the time you did, I disagreed with you, I still respected your courage, because I said, wow, he is really sitting out there. And I think that's the way forward, is that us as individuals sit there as the world changes and we stay who we are. And I think that's exactly what you've done. Has your ideology evolved? 1,000%. We get older, we get wiser, we get smarter. But you've been the person that you've been, and that's what I respect about you the most. You're welcome on here anytime, any issue. Like I said before we started this and offline, I think that this is the start of a much larger conversation nationally, and I can't give you kudos enough, dude. Honestly, I really can't. I consider you a friend, and I consider you a very, very smart man and somebody that cares about public safety, true public safety, and everyone as a whole, not just the Black and brown community, not just your viewpoint. You're willing to hear others' opinion, and you're willing to have the discussion. And I think that's where we all need to be. That's true love. That's how we get together.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate your words. Same thing back at both of you guys. I truly look forward to being here again. I think it's inevitable. So I look forward to it.
Absolutely. It's been nothing but a pleasure. It's an honor to actually meet you and just not hear gossip and scuttlebutt. I appreciate watching Crime and Punishment. I appreciate your story. And I always say opposition meets opportunity, but it's not opposition here. We have so many commonalities. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for continuing to be active. Thank you for speaking out for the cops and for your fight. I wish you nothing but luck with this book. I think it will go well. I hope this conference goes well. I wish I could attend. I'm out here in Thailand. It's 11 hours ahead. It's nighttime for me, but I'm loving it. It's been a pleasure. Talking about diversity, this beautiful culture out here. Thailand is actually very cosmopolitan, and everybody gets along great here. It's interesting to see, outside the states, how people could really mingle together and be in a multicultural environment. So again, I appreciate it. I do see that we will do this again. This could have went on 3-4 hours, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So I thank you for your time taking it out for us. I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Edwin, anything you want to add before we go? Last words, brother.
Just please show up, be there at King's Theater. I promise you, you will not regret it. It's an activation for something much bigger.
All right, you heard it here. New York's Finest Retired and Unfiltered Podcast with the great and powerful Edwin Raymond. We'll be back at you.
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.